Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Full Potential Live Show with your host, Nick Wagner Sr. I even have my t-shirt on tonight, repping my own brand. And I'm thrilled to have a very interesting guest on tonight. And you can just tell he's interesting for two reasons. One is the background behind him, which is super cool, full of stuff that him and his family created. And the second thing is his entire name on LinkedIn is all lowercase letters, and it's by design, right? Because everything in this man's life is by design, which we're gonna dive into. So he also wears bow ties, which I love because I will rock them occasionally at a wedding. So James, first I want to say thanks for joining the show, and I'll have you introduce yourself in 1 second. I want to just share. So we do this every Sunday night. I have amazing guests like yourself on, and we record it live here on LinkedIn and YouTube. So everyone who's watching this live, first want to say thank you. And then we take the recording, and then I'll share the YouTube video later this week on all my social media, and hopefully James will share it as well. And then we take the audio and turn it into the Full Potential podcast. So for those of you that don't want to watch my ugly face for 40 minutes, you can just listen to the conversation on your favorite podcast platform. You know, Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, etc. So James, thank you so much, and I'll let you introduce yourself to my audience. So I always ask it this way: if you were at a conference or a function where you don't know anyone, and someone comes up and says, like, "Hey, nice to meet you," and they introduce themselves, how does James wieselman schulman actually introduce himself? Like, what would you say?
Sure. Well, Nick, thanks again for having me tonight. I'm really excited to get the chance to talk and share a little bit of the journey that I've been on and continue to be on. So typically, I tend to sort of start small and get a feel for, does somebody really want to talk to me, or are they just being nice? Okay. So I start with, I work in innovation at Cigna, and I sort of get a feel for, like, do they go, oh, that's interesting, innovation at Cigna, what's Cigna? Wait a minute, you're in health insurance, you do innovation, how is that thing? And then I get into, I'm a designer by background, and I bring human-centered design methods to insurance, and they say, I don't understand that. What do you mean design innovation at Cigna? You guys are in health insurance. And then typically it gets to, oh, insurance is evil, and then I say, oh, thank you, I'll go have another drink. Or it's, oh, that's super interesting, and I say, yeah, you know what? I've been able to really bring in, this different skill set, and we're in the process of trying to really bring humans into healthcare and make a difference to the work that I do and design a better future for healthcare. And that's where I start, and it goes from there.
Very interesting. Yeah, and that's James kind of let the cat out of the bag. So we know each other because we work at Cigna together. But we are actually going to talk not just about what James does at Cigna today. We're going to talk about James' career journey, because I think as we kind of go through this, James, you've had a lot of really unique experiences that I think they've kind of culminated in what you do in your day job at work, and what you do outside of work with your family, and I want to say, like, your hobby that you're now taking into another level, right? So I think there's a lot that people are going to be able to learn from your journey, and I think it's very unique, which is why I wanted to have you on. So I'm thrilled to kind of start down that road and see where it leads us, right? So yeah, exactly. So why don't we start? I like to always kind of go way back, right? Because you tell people, hey, I do innovation for a Fortune 15 global health services company, and I'm going to guess when you were little James, that's not what you thought you'd do when you grew up. No, and I wanted to be an architect because I loved Legos. Right? That was my thing. Nice. So when you were in elementary school, right, and they had the career day when they would bring in all the different career people, what did you want to do when you grew up? What was your thought?
It's really funny. I wasn't one of those kids who was, I want to, be a doctor or a lawyer or an astronaut. My dad was a physician, my mom was a teacher. And it was never, that's the path I want to be on. But I remember, always, you talk about Legos, always being a tinkerer, a builder, a sort of a, we didn't call them makers back in the day, but sort of a kind of kid who would do those experiments and blow stuff up and, build stuff with Legos. I still have some of the Legos I had growing up as a kid, which is great to share with my kids. And I remember my mom saying to me, I don't remember exactly, but I was young, and she said, "Oh, you're going to be an engineer when you grow up." And I thought she meant engineer, like, train conductor engineer, not, an engineer. And I think
Right.
as I got in, a little bit older and into high school, and started to, think about what was next in college and stuff, engineering was actually the right sort of things, because it was that ability to take the theoretical, particularly the math and science, where I tended to excel. I had some learning disability, still do. And, that makes, language and writing and those sorts of activities difficult, but the math and the science, I always did very well. I understood it. I was advanced in math, advanced in science. And it was one of those, like, yeah, this is a great way to apply that theory in a fun, creative way. I always had that sort of artistic touch. My mom did some art, did some other things. My brother actually went on to get both a bachelor and a master's in art, in sculpture. So, like, there's a little bit of that art in my background, in my training, and that's where I think engineering doesn't always, but can have a little of that creativity and that sort of fun exploration of concepts and ideas. And that's got me into that field. And so when I was applying to schools, I was like, yeah, I want to be, engineering makes sense. And I ended up, going, starting my journey in that path.
Yeah, and I know you ended up, when I was looking at your LinkedIn, and before this, you ended up going for mechanical engineering at the University of Rochester. So
Yeah.
I think so many times what we end up doing as a career is influenced by our parents, right? I mean, and right, wrong, or indifferent, right? And you mentioned your father was a physician, but you didn't go that path. Did you
Yeah.
do any jobs or internships before college that led you to this path of mechanical engineering? Like, did you get to try anything, like, ahead of just taking this leap and becoming a mechanical engineering major?
I don't think I did. It's really funny. Throughout high school, up to a high school and into high school, a lot of my summers were spent actually in the out of doors. I grew up out on the East Coast, outside Boston, and I went to camp in Maine, as is often the case for people in New England. And, for me, I had the sports side of it. I was an athlete, played a couple sports in high school, but I also was into outdoors. And, I chose the camp that I chose because they had both of those things, which is rare. You tend to have one or the other. And so it wasn't, I think it was sort of this, oh, that sounds good. Like, oh, engineering sort of sounds like the right path. It wasn't, I think, a destiny or an experience that I had
Right.
that sort of said, oh, that's it. And it was sort of funny. A little bit later in my life, I applied for a job, and the gentleman was he was I think the CEO of the company was sort of grilling me, as an introduction, as a low level engineer, and he was sort of grilling me, and he was like, "Oh, did you work on cars?" I was like, no, I didn't work on cars. Like, why would I work on cars? I hate cars. Like, I'm not a car guy. He's like, well, what did you do that was like really, this hands-on, and did you build stuff? And I was like, no, I didn't do any of that stuff. And he like couldn't believe that a mechanical
Right.
engineer didn't do those things. And it's only been, in retrospect and later in life that I said, yeah, well, because I cook. And cooking for me was that thing that, brought that creativity, but also that sort of process that engineering has, and sort of
Yeah.
brings those two together. And I wasn't, quick enough or smart enough in the moment to sort of turn to him and sort of say, yeah, I cook. And that's the thing I do that really brings out that, it's a process and hands-on and creative thing that I do.
That's a really interesting. It's a really interesting answer, because I think a lot of people actually wouldn't think that engineers would make good cooks, but actually, I can see the connection there. So I
Yeah.
like that. That could be like a Netflix show, right? Like, take a bunch of engineers and put them in a kitchen, right, and see what happens. Uh,
Yeah.
so you went to school for mechanical engineering, and
Yeah.
what was, and I was, again, I read through your whole LinkedIn. I think people are going to find this interesting. Tell us about your first job out of
Yeah.
college that
Yeah.
took into consideration your degree. Like, let's hear about this.
Oh, well, okay. So I'm going to actually stop you there, because the first job I had at college was actually cooking professionally.
Oh, what?
So yeah. So I'm finishing my senior year, and in at Rochester, and trying to sort of thinking of what I'm going to do. And at that point, I had spent every summer not only doing an internship to, typically are sort of, unpaid or lightly paid, and all my free time, all the work I did was in kitchens throughout high school, throughout college. And I sort of decided if I was going to do it, that was the time. And so right out of college, I actually cooked. I went to go cook professionally. So I took a little bit of a tangential path. So I did do exactly what you're talking about of the engineer turn chef. And I sort of fell back to my engineering. After a while, I was too old, unfortunately, at that point already. I had I'd actually taken a year off before college, and I went and I did some outdoor leadership. And so I was already on the old side to begin with. And so by the time I got into cooking, I was sort of in, I won't say my mid 20s, but 23, 24. And if you're starting to cook at that age, you're too old. You have to be, at 18 cooking. And so I fell back to engineering. And it was then that I got in and sort of started to take that skill, the engineering skill, or what I thought was my engineering skill, and apply it. And I worked at Solo Cup. Actually, it turns out it's right around the corner from where I live now. The red Solo Cups, and we made them. And yes, everybody knows that everybody knew that's why they were, the keg cups, and we knew that. And I will dispel the rumor that the stripes, the lines on the cup weren't actually designed to tell you where to pour. That was not actually the case. It was sort of coincident of the process by which you make those the product. That's where those lines ended up, and then we sort of knew what it was, but they weren't designed in. It was sort of a happy coincidence. But I did that, and very quickly it was like it wasn't fun. It wasn't exciting. My engineering, my senior class project, literally we walked into day one of the senior class project, and it was a 6-month project, and the professor said, okay, you guys are going to build an injection molding machine. And we said, great, sounds awesome. Okay, we have 6 months to do it. What's an injection molding machine? And we had no idea what we were doing, and we had never really applied the skills and never really done anything because it was a very our training was very theoretical, not very technical.
Right.
And we bust our ass, and we were prototyping, and we were making stuff, and we didn't know what we were doing, but we were just, it was just a ton of fun. And by literally at graduation, we had a working injection molding machine. And at graduation, and we're pumping out, we make yo-yos, and it was just like the coolest experience. And then I go and I start working at Solo Cup, and it was totally not that. It was sitting in front of, a CAD workstation, largely converting drawings that were on vellum from these hand drawings of, 20, 30 years before into the CAD system.
Oh, interesting.
And it was totally boring. There was no problem solving. There was no real sort of like using that thinking of engineering skill set. And so I very quickly got bored with that. And luckily, sort of was able to sort of make some opportunities in that environment because we were building a lab within the engineering department. And I sort of stepped up and I said, yeah, I'm really interested. I got sort of involved in it, and I helped start to build that lab capability within that. It was a very technical lab, and it was really about, back to the red Solo Cups. We made those cups in, I think, four or five different facilities, and nobody had ever actually measured to see if those were actually the same product coming out of the different factories. They had no idea.
That's interesting.
Because there was this legacy, and each factory sort of made its own cup, and each time they made a slight tweak to it, and each time they made a slight tweak, but 10 years, 20 years later, it's not the same product. And so I went out and I actually started to test and measure and go to those facilities. Cool. Yeah. So it's really cool. Got me a lot of cool exposure, again, out of sitting in front of a CAD terminal. I got to learn a lot about testing and measurement and about statistics, sort of basic, I by no means am I a stats guy, but basic statistics that you would use in an engineering environment to test, products, right? To say, hey, we're making these two products. Are they really the same, or are they different?
Right.
And in what ways are they different? And I got to do some training. It was really the beginning of where I got to do more training and development, and those experiences went to a bunch of different facilities around the country, to the factories, and got to meet the people on the floor, which is really cool, and got to do some worked with some of the new product development team as they were coming out with some new products, new materials that we were working with some of our vendors. And it was just like it made it a little bit cooler than again, just sitting down doing that all day long.
I mean, I think it was more people focused, right? Which clearly I think you're passionate about. So what was your big takeaway from that job at Solo Cup, and how did you pivot from there into your next role?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I started to, and again, always in retrospect, it's easier to look at it now, but I think this idea of like standing up and sort of like asking to be involved in stuff like works, right? Like raising your hand and sort of saying like, hey, I'm gonna try that thing. Oh, you're doing that thing? Oh, I can help. I'm gonna raise my hand for this thing, and I don't know what I'm doing, but that's okay. And I think it got me to do that and say, there are times when you're sort of in a funk, or in a sort of in a mode where you're sort of plugging away. But you know what? Raise your hand. There's opportunities, and you can kind of start to make your own path in ways that you don't always think that you can. And that was really the first time that I think I was able to really sort of do that.
And I think that's such powerful advice, no matter where you are in your career, because I always tell people, like you just said, the worst thing they say is no.
Right.
Okay. If you ask and they say no, they say no, right? But like if you hadn't said, hey, I'd love to be a part of this lab, you never would have the opportunity. So I love that, because I think many people are afraid to do what you just said. And I think if more people just kind of, because it's uncomfortable, right? People don't want to do something that's uncomfortable. They don't want to hear rejection, right? So that's what prevents them from making that leap.
Yeah. And I think there's also sometimes you don't know what you're stepping into.
Absolutely. And the unknown.
And it's unknown. And it can be that opportunity to lean into that and say, yeah, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing, but you know what? Neither does anybody else around here.
Right,
and so that's okay. It's okay, and I'll learn as I go, and I'm going to screw some things up, and I'm going to make some mistakes. And it's, not about the mistakes that you make. It's about how you learn from that, and how do you grow, and how do you really sort of create those opportunities to learn and develop in what you're doing, and bring on new skill sets, take on new stuff that you don't know about.
And I mean, innovation is really about failure, right? I mean, the reality is you're not innovating without failing. That's just, there's no way around it. So I think that's a great, I love that takeaway. So what was next? So Solo Cup, you got a lot out of that, but how did you move from there?
So this is where I start to, I think what's interesting is the trajectories of my wife and I really get interesting, and this is really when it happened. So as I mentioned, I left engineering to go cook, and the deal at the time was, my wife was my girlfriend at the time. She was going to get a PhD in psychology, and I said, I'll go wherever you go, wherever you get into school. I'll go. I'll move. I can cook because it's easy. And it turns out we end up in Chicago. She ends up at the University of Chicago. And she very quickly sort of realized in her path, academia wasn't for her. She didn't want to teach. She'd want to be a researcher. She liked aspects of it, but she wasn't going to go down that route with a PhD, although she continued and ended up getting her PhD. And early on, a gentleman who had been at U of C had come back to give a talk about what you can do with a PhD if you don't go into academia. This guy by the name of Rick Robinson. And Rick is really a pioneer in the field of human-centered design. He had started this company with a couple other people that really brought together multidisciplinary consulting approach. What we would now sort of think of as design thinking or a design consultancy.
Right.
and they were one of the first firms. This was in the mid '90s already, so
wow.
Yeah, quite a long time ago. And so my wife fell in love with that. She said, "That's where I have to work." And she started there, and she started working on projects where there were, she's a researcher. There were, people with business backgrounds and engineering backgrounds and industrial design backgrounds and communication design backgrounds, and they bring these multidisciplinary, consulting teams together. And for me, that was like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. And there was a gentleman there who had a similar path to me, had been in engineering, sort of fell out of it, and then went to grad school at the Institute of Design in Chicago. And I said, that's what I have to do. Like, I love this idea of this, human-centered design world. Perfect. That's what I want to do. And then life got in the way, and we ended up relocating. I left my job at Solo Cup, and we ended up relocating to Boston, where I'm from. But my wife had this opportunity. We said, great, fine, we'll move. We don't care. Like, though we had been in Chicago, we loved Chicago. We said, you know what, we'll give it a try. And we moved to Boston, and I didn't sort of land a professional job, but I worked in a hardware store, actually a high-end woodworking shop called Rockler. So I learned a lot about woodworking while I was there, which is now coming in handy. And shortly thereafter, my wife says, you know what, as part of her research for her dissertation, we got to go to Spain. And that was where her research was going to be conducted. And her lab advisor had a big grant to help pay for it. And we said, great, let's pick up and move to Spain. Yeah. And we picked up and we moved to Spain. And so I wasn't working again at that time, so it was fine. And I taught English in Spain, which is hilarious if you know me. But it was really a chance for us to just, again, experience something new. We had no idea what we were doing. Right. And this was, we moved a week before 9/11. Wow. So a very different world at that time. I mean, technologically speaking, there was no high-speed internet. There was no cell phones. There was no, I don't think there was LinkedIn. There was no YouTube. There was no picking up the phone and call people. There was no WhatsApp. And we went there and we had a great time, and we really fell in love with Spain. And it was while I was there that I actually applied to grad school while I was in Spain. And I came back and I went right into the Institute of Design. Again, this is now 2001, right. Basically 2002. And that really sort of took that, from a career, really sort of, made that change in the trajectory that I was on from that engineering path to a human-centered design path.
And so, I always, I think this, right? Like, there's many people in the United States that don't have a bachelor's degree, right? And there's even fewer people that have, a master's degree or a PhD. So what was the driving force for you to go back to school for design, right? Because you already had a 4-year degree in mechanical engineering, which most people would think is like, well, this is fantastic. Like, go get a job with mechanical engineering. What was that? Why did you know you had to do that? Because that's a big step for people going back to school.
It was. And I think, as I mentioned, my mom was a teacher. My dad's a physician. And I think ingrained in us was this, what we would now call growth mindset, right? Or, always learning. It's related to growth mindset, but it's this like constantly learning, right? This idea of always, taking on new stuff and expanding your, what you do and how you work. And I think for me, it was just, I didn't say, I knew I was going to go to grad school, but it was a path that I kind of made sense, particularly also, as I said, as I was making this transition from engineering into design. And I knew that it was a way to get a foot in the door in a way that I might not have been able to do as an engineer. But to really sort of make a big leap forward in the direction that I wanted to go. Once I really said, I want to be a designer. I want to take the skills I have and the experiences I have, but apply them in a slightly different way. And it just made sense. And again, at the time, my wife was still in school. She was trying to remember exactly the timeline, but she had been in school for a while. She was still in grad school, so it was like very comfortable to have that academic sort of environment and the learning environment. And it's something that I think I hope I continue to do. I try to constantly learn stuff and take on new skills and apply, what I'm learning. And to your point, fail at a lot of stuff, but constantly learn and grow and develop because I think it's important.
So let me ask this, because is someone who's already an engineer, right? And now you're going to go to school for product design, which it sounds like it actually makes a lot of sense, right? Like, okay, this mechanical engineer, you already clearly had like a design, angle that you kind of thought that way, right? You had that design mind.
Yep.
When you went to school, like what were you ecstatic? Was it fun? Was it everything you thought it was? Was it frustrating? Like, what was it like?
Yeah, all of the above.
All of the above, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I think I really leaned into it, and it was a great experience. I loved, the stuff the stuff we were working on and the projects I got to do and the ability to apply stuff. And I got human-centered design is really the way to sort of think about it. Is it's rooted in kind of three elements. It's there's sort of the design side of it, industrial design, communication design, engineering to some degree, the making of the stuff, simplicity. And then there's the human side of it, right? Which is the social science, the psychology, the sociology pieces of it. Now, the behavioral economics, right? Which behavioral economics grew out of psychology, right? Was, Kahneman and Tversky, right? Were psychologists. And then business, right? Where it's, okay, don't just make stuff that's cool looking and don't just pay attention to what people, the way they behave and what their goals and needs and aspirations are, but actually make it in a way that can drive business forward. And that, for me, it was just really exciting to kind of bring those things in. Again, having some exposure of the psychology from my wife, who, has a PhD in psychology. So I got, to experience some of that through her, and then the engineering, and then to learn some of the business stuff, which, once you're working, you get bits and pieces of it, and then to sort of bring that together to really sort of think about, okay, how do we make stuff that people want that you can make money doing? And that just was really, really exciting and fun. I
think that's a good way of describing it, because I think it's it's that culmination of all these different, I guess, worlds, right, into one place. And you went to, I think you went to the IIT Institute of Design, which I think is one of the best design schools, I think, in the world, if I'm not mistaken. So, you go back to school. What are your plans after school? I mean, did you know what you wanted to do, or you were kind of thinking this will open up doors and we'll see what happens?
Yeah, no. Again, it's a recurring theme here. I didn't have I don't think I've ever had this strong, I want to work at company XYZ, or I want to do this thing. I think it was more, hey, look, I have this engineering background, which is unique. There were, in my class, there were a handful of us with engineering, but it wasn't a ton. So I have that background. I'm learning this design stuff. What do I want to do? And I got lucky in a sense, because at the time I got to work at Dyson. And they had been in the United States for a little bit and were opening up an office in Chicago. And they were really expanding into these markets. They'd been in the US for some time, but it was starting to be really a big market for them. And while I worked there, the US became their largest sales market, which is sort of cool. And so they were building out these engineering teams outside of the main office, which is in Malmesbury. It's sort of in the West Country in England. And so they said, yep, we're going to put design teams throughout the globe in our key markets, in Central Europe, in Italy, in Japan, in the United States. And it was really exciting because I got to go there, which is a company that is very rooted in engineering and an engineering philosophy. And they live and breathe it. And, I work with some of the most unbelievably talented engineers and designers there. They were, amazingly passionate and amazingly gifted, problem solvers and thinkers in a very, technical engineering way. And it was great because I could say, look, you're coming into this market in the US, you don't know anything about these people. right? You don't know who your users are, what the market looks like. Most of your designers are, young 20-year-olds who are, from the UK.
Right.
What do
Yeah.
they know about what it's like for, someone in the United States who, lives in a, couple thousand square foot house in the suburbs, who's buying your products? And it was this great opportunity to work there and bring this new skill set that they didn't necessarily have, because they weren't, they're not rooted in the psychology, but they're rooted in the engineering side. They're not necessarily rooted in that sort of psychology side and the human side to the work that they do.
That must have been really cool to be, because as you said, they were an established brand in the UK, but it must have been really cool to kind of watch them grow. And I think most people watching or listening to this know Dyson, but in 2005, that probably wasn't the case.
Yeah. No, they were this obscure high-end, vacuum cleaner that I think at the time, what we're just getting into the major retail. I don't think, again, while I was there, they got into the Targets and the Walmarts and the Costcos while I was there. And it was exciting, to your point. It was also exciting because I got to work on stuff that wasn't vacuum cleaners. A number of projects that I got to explore were other initiatives. Turns out none of them came to fruition. But it was cool because I wasn't just, we're building the next vacuum for the US market.
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
Hey, we see other opportunities for other products that we can start to bring into the market in the US. And it was really cool to get to do that. And my partner, I had a guy who I worked with, a partner in crime, and he's an amazingly talented engineer, and we've stayed close ever since, because we worked so close together. It was basically the two of us in a room, trying stuff out and working on stuff ever since, sort of since then.
Well, and to your point, right? If you look at Dyson today, one of the other really cool things that they have, they have those really cool fans, right?
Yeah,
with the bladeless fans, and I think the other thing that people, especially now with COVID, that I think a lot of people know them for, is all the stuff all the touchless stuff in a public bathroom, right? Like the faucets and the hand dryers. So you might not have worked on something that ended up going to market, but like to your point, they kept innovating and kept trying things.
Yeah. And I think, for me, one of the things I learned there, they have such a strong prototyping culture. They say it in their ads, right? And you're like, oh, okay, it's great. They say it in their ads. It is true. Like, right. It is. I learned, that's something that's really stuck with me, this idea of, you have an idea for something and instantly the response was, go make it. Like, don't tell me, don't tell me your idea. Go make a thing. Go make a working prototype, a physical prototype, some sort of thing. And every product they made started in cardboard. So I'm very good at making all sorts of Halloween costumes, Halloween costumes out of cardboard. And it just, that mentality and that idea really sort of, I've kept, and I think it's such an important thing that can be applied in so many different things that you do. We all think, oh, what can I prototype? I'm a accountant. Oh, I make spreadsheets all day long. What can I send emails. What can I prototype? And in a sense, you can prototype all those things. Like everything is everything is prototypable. You make a form, you make a presentation, you make a email. Try 2 different ways to make the same email. And see what happens, and talk to your users, engage with your users, and that just stuck.
It's just funny. And clearly this is in your blood, but like what you just mentioned, right? That in its simplest form is innovation. I know people don't think of it that way, right? But that really is innovating, right? To your exact point. So let's talk about the big shift. Because you leave Dyson, which a lot of people would probably say, I can't believe you left Dyson, right? Because it's to your point, right? They're growing, they're becoming this really like well-known brand, and you decide to go work for yourself.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it was actually by choice, but it was I think it was, being in that world, being in the design space, there is something about the freedom, right, that comes from going off on your own and doing stuff and getting exposure to all sorts of different industries, right? When you're working at a big corporate, even at Dyson, which is cool and innovative, like all you're working on is the stuff they want to work on. And that's a
Yeah.
really narrow, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's,
Of course.
vacuum cleaners or hand dryers or whatever. And so it was a really great experience for me to get to go and work with all sorts of different people in all sorts of different environments. And things that were more, product oriented, things that were, more consumer good oriented, CPGs, some food stuff, which, obviously I love. Also some, more services, to, sort of my first exposure into, really sort of more service design kinds of things where it's not, the companies aren't selling a product that you touch and feel, but it's, what's the experience that you have with that company and what are they selling you, the kinds of services that you're selling you. And I think that really showed me that the skills that I had built up, right, as we had talked about, the engineering skills from Solo Cup and, the travel and the, sort of throwing everything to the wind skills. And then at Dyson, the prototyping skills, these really apply everywhere. There's no particular industry where you can't bring this mindset and this way of doing and this way of problem solving. And it really, I think, changed for me that perspective of, everybody can have the potential to do it. I don't want to say everybody should innovate, everybody can innovate, everybody can design, but there's a potential to bring that thinking and that mindset really in any industry across the board. And that was really exciting, to get to experience that and see it and learn from all these different experiences.
So when you went off and on LinkedIn it says you were a strategy and research consultant, what was what was that like, right? Because that must have been a big shift. And as an entrepreneur myself, as someone who owned my own business, it's not easy, right? I mean, it is very different from working for someone and every 2 weeks you look at your bank account like, oh, cool, I got paid again. That's pretty sweet, right? To like, I know you're good at design and engineering, but now you got to be good at sales to get the business to work for yourself. So how was that different? And did you you did it for over 6 years, so clearly you probably liked it, but what did you like and what did you not like about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like I like the freedom, I like the flexibility, as I mentioned. I like the ability to work in all sorts of different industries. I got to work with a lot of my friends, who were in different companies, whether they were consultants and they needed, extra hands on deck, or whether they were, at corporations who needed particular skills brought into their organization. And so, the fun of that, again, the excitement of working on different stuff and different projects in different environments with different teams. But as you said, Nick, right, it's hard. You do have to spend a lot of time sort of selling yourself and get a lot of rejections or a lot of like, oh, it's going to happen next week. And then next week comes and, oh, I'll talk to you next week. And next week comes and, oh, give me 2 weeks. And some of that, I think you sort of learn a lot of patience, a lot of being able to kind of, okay, I'll wait. I can let things happen. But it's sort of an anxious time when you don't have that, regular paycheck and you don't know where it's coming. And it's a feast or famine, right? Sort of model that can take its toll. At the time I was lucky, my wife was working full time. We were, had sort of a stable environment. My kids were young. I got to spend a lot of time with my kids. So I enjoyed that, but it was hard at times. There'd be big lulls where just sort of nothing was happening. And then again, when it would rain, there'd be, 2-3 projects simultaneously and I'm running around like a crazy person. So it was hard. That up and down, that ebb and flow was difficult. I think emotionally and then on the family as well.
And I think it's interesting because being an entrepreneur is not for everyone. I know a lot of people think it's this most glamorous, amazing thing. And look, I think there's great things about it, like you said. I think there's not so great things about it, right? I mean, you have to, and I think to your point, it worked for you in that time of your life, right? But it might not work for everyone at all times in their life. So I think that's a great point. So what made you, what was the driving force in that real like critical junction where you decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to, working for someone. and because you've been at Cigna for almost 7 years now, so clearly something's going well, right? So
yeah, I don't. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going right, but yeah, I'll take it.
So
yeah.
so what was the ultimate decision point that you had to make to go back to work for someone?
Yeah, I think it was, it was that sort of trade-off. I think as we've been discussing this, a little bit of stability is a good thing.
Right.
And, my kids were getting, older, and it was sort of a look, the idea of not having to go chase where my next paycheck comes from, even if, it's maybe not the most exciting thing all the time. And I'm not saying that my job is that way, because I do really love what I do. But it was one of those trade-offs that I said, you know what, a little bit of stability is worth it. And when I was looking, I was looking for the kind of environment, and again, I think I got really lucky, sort of the way that it panned out, where I wanted to work on a new team. So I got to bring in new thinking and new skill set, and it wasn't a well-established organization that I could, we were trying to figure it out as we go, as we talked about, there isn't an answer. So go make one up, go figure it out, go test it out, try out the methods and the tools and the practice. And there was the freedom and the flexibility within that sort of, that organization, that within that innovation team, but there was structure around it, and that I think for me has been a constant at Cigna, through my 7 years here. That it's always been that way. I've had a ton of freedom within my team, and as I interact with lots of people, and we work together, and that ability to kind of go do stuff and take things on and experiment and try and do it, and have that leadership again within the organizations that I've worked, to be able to go do that stuff and practice stuff and try stuff, but do it in a safe environment where, when things go wrong, and it's okay. You're not going to lose your job, or you're not going to worry about not getting the call back for the next job if things don't go well. You'll learn from it, and you'll grow from it, and you'll get the next try. And we've been able to do that, and so it's been really a reward. Ever since, it's been this really rewarding journey. Very surprising, to be honest.
So I think you bring up a great point, which I think a lot of people don't realize is you can be entrepreneurial in very large corporations. I know that's like a crazy idea to say out loud, right? But it really is true. And I mean, I think I do that in HR as an example. I did that when I was in IT. You're doing that in the roles that you've been in. And I think what people don't realize is that, we're recovering entrepreneurs is what I would call us, right? You can find companies that embrace people that think like us, even though we're at a Fortune 15 company, right? And I actually think that a lot of corporations really appreciate entrepreneurs working for them, because we inherently think differently, and we inherently take more risks, and we are inherently more innovative because we were entrepreneurs. So I love that you just highlighted that, because I think a lot of people don't think you can be innovative or entrepreneurial at large companies. I don't think it could be. I think it couldn't be any farther from the truth if you find the right company.
Yeah, and it's not easy. I think it's just
You're
a different. It's a different. As I've always sort of thought about it. It's an 80-20, right? There's 20% of your job that you love and you would do it all day long, and there's 80% that's sort of the crap that you have to do. But if you like that, if you can handle that 80% and it doesn't bother you, then you can sort of survive. And I think that's an important thing to remember, that you got to sort of find those places. And to your point, it's possible within big companies. And, that doesn't mean you can sit back and hope. Nobody's going to give it to you. Nobody's going to say, oh, hey, here's all the opportunities. Just go for it. Have fun, Nick. Good luck screwing this thing up. We'll happy to.
Right.
It's about, you got to lean in, and as you said before, sometimes somebody's just going to say no, and then you say, okay, either learn and figure out what the no meant, right? Why was it a no, and is it a no never, or is it just a no today, or is it a no, I need to pivot, I need to do something else, or that's the wrong path, I need to go in a different direction. And I think that ability to kind of see the world different and push and poke and prod, and not accept, in certain ways, not accept just the status quo of, well, that's the way we do it here. well, why do we do it that way? Why can't we do
Yeah.
it this other way? Or why can't we try this? Or why can't we, why can't you, as I mentioned earlier, oh, you want to, you're working on this thing. Could you try doing it a different way? Could you try this, to experiment? Could you try to engage with your stakeholders in a different way than you normally do? And most of the time people say yes. If you give them a good reason, most people are more than willing. And I think, I should say, at least where we work, I find it amazing how often, if you can sort of convince some people that, yep, it's worth it. You'll actually get a better benefit, and that it's not that hard. And yeah, it's scary sometimes, but the reward is pretty amazing based on the risks that they have to take, which are, in the grand scheme of things, relatively low, right? What's it cost to go talk to some users, right? What's the worst that happens? You don't learn anything, fine. So we waste a little time, big deal.
So I think one question I have for you, because you were, why health services? Why the healthcare space? Because it is not a physical product like Dyson or Solo Cup, right? It is, to your point, what you said earlier, it's obviously service based. You really can't touch it, right? I mean, it's selling a service. So what drew you to work for a health services company? What was it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and a funny. So I go back to my wife a little bit. So my wife had, when she had ended up working at a product design and development firm here in Chicago. Shout out Inside Product Development, awesome firm, and they did a ton of medical product design. Implantables and devices and CPAP machines and beds and all this crazy. They had a wall. I remember they had a wall in their office of all these patents they had. It was amazing. Cool. Unbelievable designers and engineers and researchers. And she'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to watch this guy get a heart implant device next week to go spend half a day in a hospital." I was like, "No, thank you. I am not interested in spending that time." I joked, I don't like sick people. I don't want to be near them. I'm happy to not go in a hospital. And so I had sort of avoided it for a long time. And then, the team, the Innovation COE, was founded about 7 years ago. And, it was sort of this sort of fortuitous experience in a way. The guy, Tim McKnight, who founded the team with Eric Monner, they sort of recognized they need people to think different. They needed people in the organization who weren't, long time, health insurance people. Right. Again, at the time, Cigna was just the insurer. And, they said, we need people who are going to come in and push and poke and prod and bring a different skill set. And, it was almost like I read the job description, and Tim told me after the fact, he's like, he had to fight to get this job description out. And the job description and what I wanted to do were exactly the same, because it was about bringing in, human-centered methods and tools, and about prototyping and testing, and about engaging with users, and all the stuff that, I had done, again, in all these other contexts, as I was talking about, just hadn't done it in a health case. And then it was, well, also I don't have to go into hospitals. I don't have to deal with, direct sick people, so to speak. They weren't patients at the time I was dealing with them. And it was like, perfect. I can do something, I think, too, that makes a difference. And it's, Cigna, I think, we've seen this over the last, 6 months. I think has just proven to be an amazing organization. For a Fortune 15 company, has really stepped up to COVID, stepped up to the, really the racial inequality questions that we're facing within our country right now, and has really stepped into them and really stood out and said, we're going to lead, we're going to step into this, and we're going to lead at this time. And, I think it was that sort of just that sort of mix of being in a place where I can make a difference. If one patient, one customer, one person, right, is a little bit healthier, right, lives a little bit longer, can do something they couldn't, can manage their chronic condition, reduce some costs, and obviously it's not always about money, but can get a little money back in their pocket, so they can use that money not to pay for an MRI, but to go see their kids or grandkids. That ability that I could be part of that. I mean, that was like a winning,
That's
just a
pretty cool.
winning combination. And I've been able to do it. I think that's the cool thing is I've been able to kind of do that, and not directly always, but I think that's always been our vision of, how do we bring the innovation skill set and the design skills to make people's lives better? That's what we want to do, and that's what we've been able to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said on all fronts. So I will leave it there because I couldn't have said it better myself. So I want to pivot because we've talked all about your professional career, which has been super
Yeah,
cool, and I think for a lot of people that have listened to this or will listen to this, I think they can learn a lot from your journey. But I want to talk about because clearly your family and your wife have been a big part of your obviously professional journey, and you
yeah,
recently launched something this year with your wife called
yeah.
Rethink Reframe. So I want to hear how you've taken all of these great experiences from your professional life and the experiences of your wife's professional life, and I don't want to call it a hobby because I don't know what it is at this point. But what is this initiative Rethink Reframe you launched earlier this year, and where's it going?
Yeah, so I think, as you said, it's been this sort of culmination of the experiences we've had, sort of professionally and personally, and our parenting journey. We have two, exceptional kids, and I mean that because they're differently wired. They're atypical, and so we've had to do things different. And we've done that throughout our lives. As I said, my wife went to get a PhD and then didn't go into academia. We picked up and we moved to Boston for 6 months, and then we moved to Spain, only a few minutes later, essentially. And we, 2 years ago, while I was at Cigna, we picked up and we moved to Europe for a year. And I think we've sort of applied a lot of those skills in our life, in our experience, and we see, that there's more to that. There's some life lessons in there that we think are worth kind of sharing. And we've created Rethink Reframe as this platform that can bring together a bunch of our different interests. We have these disparate interests in art and design and experience. I mentioned, building stuff and cooking and design activities, photography, writing. So there's those sorts of things. And then there's sort of these life decisions and choices in our philosophy that we've built over years, and we're still developing. It's not, by no means is it a done thing. We, I think, have always had that growth mindset of learn something new and make ourselves better. Not just to make ourselves better, but because we know we can and we know we can try. And so Rethink Reframe is sort of this. We think of it as a studio because it isn't one thing. It's really a culmination of all these different things that we're hoping to share with people. We hope people can enjoy. We hope people to share in the journey that we're on, whether it's more aesthetic kinds of things, again, art and design, clothing, pieces like that my wife mostly creates. Some of it is some furniture that I'm creating. And then it's the philosophy and the experiences that we've had, what we're calling Rethink Reframe Life, where we hope to share that journey and engage other people in that process. So we're really excited. We're knee deep in it now. We've launched the site. We're getting things up. I think we'll start to really sort of get that content out there and start to really engage in that dialogue with other people.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to hear your story, and we'll make sure, James, we'll link to your LinkedIn profile. If people want to get in touch with you to hear more about your career journey, or maybe ask you some specific questions, and we'll also link to the Rethink Reframe website as well, so if people want to
Cool.
check that out. So I want to say thank you again. This was I love hearing about people's career journeys. Yours. I mean, everyone's is unique, but yours is like beyond unique with all the different experiences you've had and all the things you've done. But I always close with the same question with every guest because obviously you've been very successful throughout your career. So what is that one piece of advice that you would give to my audience that you think's helped you reach your full potential? So what is that one thing you'd share that's helped you be so successful?
Yeah, I think it's, as we sort of talked about, it's like, what's the worst that somebody's going to say, right? And, yeah, you have to be thoughtful and you have to think through things and you have to, make sure you're going in the right direction. But I think it's this idea of leaning into things, leaning into experiences where you don't have all the answers, where you don't know what's going to happen. Again, I mentioned, we went to Europe a couple years ago as a family, and we had no idea what we were doing. We said, yeah, it'd be a cool thing to do. Screw it, we'll figure it out. Oh, what are we going to do with our kids' schooling? Don't know. We'll figure it out. And I think so often we get stuck in, oh, I can't do that. Why not? What's going to happen? Why not? Why not sort of say yes and then figure it out? And I think it's an easy thing to just say no, or I can't do it, or that's the way it is, instead of saying, yeah, no, I should do that. I can try that. And again, you might get a no, but that no can really become a reflection point and say, well, why is it a no? Is it a real no, or is it just an easy no? And then go back and push and poke and prod and say, okay, yeah, no, that's a real no. Fine, I'll go in a different direction. Or no, it wasn't a real no. It was a not now, or it was a come back when you know more. And those are those learning experiences, and those are the life lessons that I think that you can sort of take with you and grow from.
I mean, I almost think of Rethink, Reframe as you're prototyping life, and you're going to share what it's been like to prototype life with the world, right? So
exactly.
I love it. Yeah. So thank you so much. I know you're busy with the family and work and Rethink, Reframe, but I appreciate you making time. And I love that, even during COVID, I'm still able to do this thanks to technology. So I hope you and the family are healthy and safe, and we will talk again soon.
No, Nick, it was the pleasure's all mine. I was glad to do it, and thanks for having me on. And yeah, thanks again, and I'll see you soon, at least digitally. Maybe sometime I'll see you in Connecticut.
Maybe sometime in person again. Thank you, sir. Be well.
Exactly. Thank you. Have a good night. Thanks again.
You too.